Ann Coulter, how you doing?
Fine, thanks. How are you, Mark Simone?
Well, I don't know what to make of things. If you were the Biden publicity director there, would you say to yourself, putting him on television every day, letting him mumble with the mask on is really going to help? What is he thinking, doing? Why is he on television so much?
That's a good question. Why don't they just send out that spectacular Jen Psaki, the spokeswoman? I really like those compilations. Some of them are unfair, but some of them are fair, saying, I don't know, to every question.
Well, I tell you why it's fair, because we now find out the briefings are all rigged. Questions are submitted in advance.
Yeah.
And so why would 100 times she not know the answer to a question?
That's actually an excellent point. Perhaps that's why they started rigging them. Can you imagine any Republican administration asking the press to submit their questions before the press briefing? But this is just, de rigueur for Democratic administrations working hand in hand with the media. I think people are going to get sick of, it's one thing, the press has gone from just hysterical denunciations of everything about the last administration, good, bad, indifferent. They even made up conspiracy theories, to now being the Praetorian Guard to protect the administration from any cross word.
Well, this ceremony last night, Schumer, Pelosi, mourning the tragic death of the Capitol Hill police officer, and it was tragic, it was terrible. But do you think in the 12 years he worked there, Schumer ever even said hello to him?
No, it was. You're right about that. Fox News should have covered it. Somebody pointed out that everybody else was covering this, and Fox News was interviewing Eric Trump or something. That's not good. And I love the guy. I love law enforcement. He was a Trump supporter. He was a handsome young man. So I think it is nice. And also he was working. There is something qualitatively different about, even if it's just entering a restricted building and disorderly conduct, as opposed to burning down a police precinct, smashing store windows and looting them, attacking civilians. The Capitol is something different. And yes, of course they were doing it because these were Trump supporters who entered the Capitol building without permission. One thing that I find odd about the Officer Sicknick death is that I don't think we're getting the true story on it. I don't know what the true story is. I'm not saying this in defense of the people who stormed the Capitol. A lot of them were jerks. I think most of them had no idea they weren't supposed to just walk in and take selfies of themselves with statues. Probably more than 90% of them didn't see any violence, weren't the ones who broke down the doors. But be that as it may, it's like this. I have a journalist friend who got the New York Times to retract one of its major stories during the COVID outbreak. There was a big story about 26-year-old medical intern, perfectly healthy, dies of COVID. And my friend pointed out, this is a weird story. We don't get his name. We don't get any quotes from any of the people working with him. And so first he complained to the New York Post, or Times rather, saying, are you sure about this story? Why can't we talk to any of the people he was working with, family members, anything? And then he put the Washington Post onto it, which called around to hospitals and found out it was a completely apocryphal story. The New York Times refused to take back for like a month. It was just it was like a rumor on Twitter. Well, it's a lot the same thing with Brian Sicknick's death. It's very vague. There are no eyewitnesses. There have been two different stories about how the Capitol riot caused his death. One was that he was hit by a fire extinguisher. Then completely separately, without explaining the last version of it, is that he was dragged into the crowd and beaten. His family itself has said nothing about it and said, would you please stop reporting on this? He always wanted to be a police officer, great man, we're very sad, but please stop using his death for political gain. He didn't die during the riot. He went back to headquarters and then died of something. We don't know what. But this is their case in chief. A Capitol Hill officer who dies allegedly as a result of the riot. That's their best case, Mark Simone. I mean, there's Ashley Babbitt, who was one of the rioters, or whatever you want to call them, one of the mob. She was shot dead. Two of the Capitol rioters had heart attacks. One woman was apparently trampled and died. So that's it. Those are all your deaths. A Capitol Hill police officer, they are claiming, was essentially murdered by the rioters, but we can't get the story. So
Interesting.
I'm calling BS on it.
Well, you've written books about this, trying to explain this democratic mentality where they fall for just total symbolism and with no substance, like climate change, the Paris Climate Accords. Doesn't do a damn thing, but it sounds good. Or Cuomo, if you look at New York, it's a disaster under him. But the briefings are dazzling. So all around the country, they think he's a great leader. Well, how does that mentality work?
Yes, it's all described in my book, Demonic, about groupthink and mobthink. This, incidentally, is the first conservative mob in U.S. history. I mean, name another one. You can't think of one. It's always leftist. It's SDS and the Weathermen and BLM and Antifa and the student protesters taking over deans' offices, which is what this whole Capitol riot thing reminds me of. It's like kids taking over the dean's office and snapping selfies. Yeah, of course, they should be prosecuted, but stop acting like this is anything close to the BLM riots this year that did billions of dollars worth of damage and lots of people died and were murdered. But the attacks on the Capitol Hill police for not being prepared. No, of course they weren't prepared. This has never happened before. It has not happened in history. You will discover that in my book, Demonic, about mobs and groupthink. And yeah, you're absolutely right. In addition to the actually violent mobs, what you think of as a mob, there's the mob way of thinking where they just have symbols, and it's all described by a French philosopher in a book, The Man Who Invented the Concept of Groupthink. And mass psychology, I forget his first name, last name, Ellul, something about the popular mind. But anyway, it just goes like point by point into the liberal mentality. And yes, they like symbols, they like short. They're always the ones with the slogans. You know, have you ever noticed Republicans are terrible at slogans? No, it's something short that can be shouted and gets you down to the ramparts. And they are always falling for, you know, just a rumor somebody heard, like the 26-year-old intern who died of COVID. And now whatever it was that happened to Officer Sicknick, and again, I'm a big fan, and I think the people who stormed the Capitol are jerks. But come on, give me the real story here.
Well, I forgot about that book. That's a great book. Everybody should get that. In fact, you can order it, right? Just go get Demonic by Ann Coulter. It is very relevant today, explaining this mob mentality, demonic. And of course, go to AnnCoulter.com. You can get the new column and follow her on Twitter. But AnnCoulter.com's got a lot of great stuff up there. Ann Coulter, thanks for being with us.
Good to talk to you, Mark Simone. Bye-bye.
All right, take care.